Thank you. Welcome everybody. Good to see you all. We've got apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Smith and Steve Larter.
Thank you. We've got some new faces in the chamber on the Pensions Committee. We've got Councillor Marion Overton. Welcome. We also got Peter Allen from the Pension Board, and we've got George Graham, who will be taking over the reins from Roger. But we'll go into that a little bit later on. We'll introduce you to George, so you know what he's all about. So now we're on to declarations, members' interests. If there's any of those, please. Mark? Can you put your mic on, because Rachel couldn't quite hear that. If I can ask, if we do put the mics on, don't hide them with a laptop flap, because it's difficult for one people to hear. Thank you, Mark.
Chairman, I'm in receipt of a Lincolnshire Pension Fund pension.
Thank you. Joe?
I'm an active member.
Tom?
Yeah, hi, I'm an active member as well.
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm joining from the pension at the minute. Thank you.
Marianne?
I think I'm also registered to get in the scheme.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 6th of June. I'll not go through each page, but if anyone has got any issues on the accuracy of those minutes, I would ask them to put their hand up now and just point them out, please. So if that's okay, I will sign those minutes. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 4, which is a report by the independent chair of the Lincolnshire Local Pension Board, which, as most of us know, is Roger. And this is his last report to us after 9 years. So don't let him off easily. Over to you and Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, the report is fairly short, pages 9 to 11. I will assume that the main body of the report has been read, so I'll concentrate on the assurances in section 2 of the report. As will be reported later, the Pension Regulators Code has been replaced by the General Code. As a result, the checklist that you'll be aware I've always kind of gone on about, because they were not all green, it will no longer be used. However, I think it's fair to say that my comments on the completion of training requirements are still valid, and I think you'll be picking that up later on in the agenda. I think it's fair to say that we always have a good discussion on the administration performance, and the conclusion was that despite some of the SLAs being lower than target, and it's fair to say that they were of lower priority, we do feel that West Yorkshire continues to offer members a very good service. I mean, for me, the litmus test, and I've used this over the last many years, 80,000 members, very few complaints, and that to me is a real test. So, well done. Temporary bank accounts, bit of a pain they are. I'm sure they are for West Yorkshire in particular. But they're still an issue, although we did welcome the fact that there'd been a reduction in the number of accounts for pension benefits. We are hoping that West Yorkshire continues the good work and reduces them even further. As regards the refund of contributions, well, the sector continues to make representations to the Scheme Advisory Board, requesting a change to the regulations to remove the requirement for a refund to be paid within 5 years, but I guess that's parked at the present time. We also received a presentation on the internal disputes resolution procedure. So this is when people have got grievances and what have you. And the conclusion was that it was very good. And finally, Chairman, we had a report from the external auditor. I guess, me personally, I'm delighted that KPMG have been appointed, and I think the Pension Board is optimistic that the annual report and accounts for 23-24 will be signed off by the required deadline. And you'll be aware that Lincolnshire is one of the few authorities that have had their accounts signed off for 22-23. Chairman, that concludes my report, but if there are any questions, I will try and answer them.
Thank you, Roger. Any questions there?
Got a
Usually
research.
to the point and succinct. It's your trademark, but also your knowledge is also another trademark, which probably outperforms some of the members on pensions. So at this point, I would like to give you a vote of thanks for what you've done. I'll ask Eddie to say a few words, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I will stand in honour of Roger. As it was mentioned, he's been 9 years in the job. His job, of course, is to hold this committee to account, which he has done in, as the Chairman rightly says, a succinct and very professional manner. So we thank you, Roger, for all your service in that time, and we wish you well in retirement. And I think the committee and those attending will now show their appreciation. Well done, Roger. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Eddie. It's been a pleasure working with you because, I mean, you've been chairman most of the time. And I guess, unlike a number of authorities, the Pension Board has always enjoyed a very good working relationship with the Pensions Committee. And long may it continue. But thank you.
Mark?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm stepping back a little bit because you did ask if there's any questions, Roger. I could leave it for your successor, but it might not be fair to do that. So perhaps it's wise to raise it while you're still here. But I would like to offer my thanks because you were chairman of the Pension Board when I was chairman of the Pensions Committee getting on for 8 years ago. It's to do with the Pension Board. Does the Pension Board have any legal requirement or any appropriate requirement to comment on any changes that might be put forward regarding how the local government pension scheme is operated, particularly with comments about greater pooling arrangements, never mind what might come out of the new government as well. And is there a sort of joint chairman of the pension boards, nationally, that gets together to discuss these sorts of things, or is this entirely out of your remit because you're looking very, very locally in terms of what happens within the Lincolnshire area?
Wow. There are two elements to that question. I mean, okay, we do concentrate on the local issues, but hopefully you'll know that I've raised national issues here, particularly in relation to external audit and the fact that local authority accounts have not been signed off. And I've taken that wider through my own professional institute. So I would say that the Pension Board would comment, but we would do it in cooperation with the Pensions Committee. It's no use the Pensions Board kind of having this view and the Pensions Committee having that view. There's got to be a compromise. So on that sort of big issue, yes. In terms of Pension Board chairs, well, in the early days, and perhaps over the last, I suppose COVID interfered with it, but we did used to have a meeting of pension board chairs for Borders to Coast. So normally on perhaps the day of the conference that Borders to Coast put on. I know there was one last, well, I don't know whether it occurred, but I couldn't make it because I was elsewhere. And I guess the other thing is there tends to be an annual conference of pension board members and chairs, and that's an opportunity to kind of have a good discussion on various issues. So yes.
Chairman, if with your allowance, please. The reason I mentioned it, Roger, is that I certainly have a view as a pension committee member, and I think it has been mentioned at the committee itself on some occasions, that the ability of the committee to actually deliver its responsibilities with regard to the Lincolnshire Pension Fund does seem to be getting more difficult as we've moved into the pooling arrangements. And I know that there are arrangements within the pooling things to try and ensure that, that the pension committee members don't seem to be isolated. And I know that we do have this rolling setted strategy that's meant to be, that's then delivered, within the pooling arrangements. But the concern is that if we are forced to go into bigger pooling arrangements, the committee's role becomes perhaps even more diluted than it is at the moment. And it's maybe the same for the pension board. It becomes more and more difficult, to consider and ensure delivery of the local issues. When a lot of the decision making is taking place, in different areas with a different, bigger group of people involved in it. So I just wondered whether that is the sort of thing that maybe the pension board chairman have got concerns about. Well,
Chairman, I mean, at the end of the day, Borders to Coast is an investment management house, and it's a big one. And, the Pensions Committee's responsibility is investment strategy. The fact that you probably don't like everything that Borders to Coast do, that can be fed back through the Joint Committee, or indeed through the Section 1.5 officers, through the Director of Finances route. I don't necessarily agree with you that the responsibilities. The responsibilities would remain the same for the Pensions Committee and the Pensions Board. And we get a report from West Yorkshire. We give them we challenge them, in a very nice way. But Eunice is here today. I've not seen him for a couple of years, but we've sent him off with various queries and what have you. So I don't see it changing, quite frankly. I mean, I think the real fear that I sometimes wonder about is whether or not the government will seize the 381 billion that's in all the local authority pension funds and say, right, we're taking it. And then we'll make it, it will be a non-funded arrangement, like they've got a police, fire, NHS, education, etc.
Well, that would solve the problem to a certain extent and remove my concerns, wouldn't it? And I must admit, like you, my concerns only have a very limited forward view because I won't be seeking re-election to the County Council or to this Pensions Committee after May, so I won't have to worry about it anymore.
Thank you, Mark. You didn't get off scot-free, Roger. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mark. What I will do now is introduce Roger's successor. That's George Graham here. I'll just ask George to give a minute or two of who he is and what he is and what he's about.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Coupland said, my name is George Graham. In my day job, I'm currently Director of the South Yorkshire Pensions Authority, which is one of Lincolnshire's partners in Border to Coast, and is also a bit of an anomaly within LGPS in terms of the way it's set up. Previously, I've been the Director of the Lancashire Pension Fund and Deputy County Treasurer at Lancashire, with responsibility for the pension fund, and I was involved in setting up the LPP pool and LPP's admin business as part of that. So I actually did what Ewan and Eunice do in terms of running a shared service. I ran a shared service from Lancashire for various admin authorities. And that's about me. To Councillor Allen's point about how the pension board can support the committee in various debates. The pension board brings in a range of scheme member and employer views, which I think it's important that the committee considers in any response it makes to any of those debates. So I think it's a way of broadening the outlook that the committee has on those issues, because ultimately we run pension funds for the benefits of the members of the scheme. And if we are if things are being proposed that are detrimental to those interests, we should be saying so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, George. I wish you good luck with the characters in this chamber, and good luck to Roger in the future, and take care of yourself. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the pension fund update report, and Joe will be bringing that.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the standard quarterly update paper with a recommendation to consider and discuss the report and agree whether any action or additional information is required. Key points I'd like to highlight from this paper: paragraph 1.9 on page 15, which updates the committee on the funding level. The actuary's report being attached to Appendix C, showing how the funding levels increased slightly over the quarter to 95.4% as at the end of March on a roll forward basis, but hopefully the committee will recall the reasoning behind that drop from our 101% funding level at the last valuation is to do with funding model changes. So it's not down to investment returns or anything else, it's down to changes in how that funding model calculates the liabilities. Section 5, excuse me, on page 16, updates the committee on activity with Border to Coast. The last joint committee was held on the 20th of June. Key points from the agenda are set out at paragraph 5.4. Next meeting will be held on the 26th of September, and members are reminded that any questions they have can be fed through Councillor Strengle, who is retaining the joint committee role on behalf of Lincolnshire. Paragraphs 5 to 8 and 5.13 set out the future strategy for the 2030 for Border to Coast, and that covers 5 areas. So that's looking at strategy and policy, investment implementation, investment related reporting, oversight and training. Border to Coast have been working closely with the partner fund officers and the senior officers to develop this strategy based on the joint needs of all partner funds. And Rachel Elwell, CEO of Border Coast, will be attending the October meeting of this committee to provide further detail on what that 2030 strategy is. Strategy will also be covered at the annual conference next week for those that are able to attend that, and shareholders will be voting on the adoption of that strategy over the summer months. Section 6 provides the outturn statement for the 23-24 budget with an underspend of 1.4 million, and that's mainly due to lower investment management fees. Section 7 on page 20 details the letter sent to chief executives and Section 1.5 offices of all the administering authorities in England by Simon Hoare when he was Minister for Local Government, asking authorities to set out their approach to efficiencies in the management, governance and administration of their LGPS fund and the asset pool. That letter is attached to Appendix E. Despite the change in political leadership, the LGA and the Scheme Advisory Board are still recommending responding to that letter. as the expectation is that Labour share the views on consolidation and UK investment that were held by the previous Minister and Government. I did circulate the draft response in Monday's weekly email to the committee members, and I have also left a copy of that at your seats in case you didn't see it in the email. So this is really an opportunity to feed back to our Section 151 and Chief Exec if there's any areas in there that you think should be added, deleted or reworded ahead of our deadline of the 19th of July to get it back. So we'll move on to that in a moment, but the last thing I'd just like to say on the paper is this obviously provides you with an opportunity to discuss any training events that have been undertaken since the last meeting, and a reminder to all that any new training opportunities are always included in the weekly email that we send out late on a Monday. So from that, I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Jo. The fund remains healthy, with the value increasing probably over the quarters. So if we've got any questions on that, if you've got any questions on the letter from government and our reply, let's just do that first, that everybody understands what's happening there. Mark?
Chairman, I've read it, and it's probably a very good response in relation to, you know, where we are in terms of the consultation that was put out, and as I do agree with you that it's very unlikely to change with the new administration, if not get even more accelerated as the incoming government starts looking for funding for its policies. I also did recognise within there is some comment about ensuring that the link between this committee and the pension fund arrangements that apply within our partnership, you know, is also recognised to a degree, and the importance that we do try and make sure that this committee is playing its role and is seen to be playing its role. I think that's the point. I was interested in the 2030 strategy because in the report it doesn't mention an awful lot about what that strategy is, apart from that it isn't under development. And I think the suggestion is that it goes to the shareholders over the course of, is it this summer, for consideration. Does that mean this committee itself doesn't see an awful lot of that? It's solely the shareholder that inputs to it on our behalf? And I suppose the obvious question to a certain extent is the shareholder a nominated person at the county council? And if that is the case, who is the nominated person at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your comments on the letter. The 2030 strategy, there was quite a lot of detail in the joint committee papers that went to the March meeting. There was quite a lot of time spent in that joint committee going through more of the detail. The shareholder role actually sits with Andrew Crookham and has been delegated to Michelle Grady. Now, this is a company strategy, therefore it is a shareholder requirement. So this is some background to tell you what's been going on. There is much more detail that has been in those joint committee papers that have obviously been shared with yourselves, and any questions on that could have been raised. So this will be more for information. So I think the key points really are that in looking to expand what Border to Coast can offer, it won't be mandatory that we have to participate in it. It's looking to the future about could they provide an advisory service that could work alongside our investment consultants and advisor. Could they do currency hedging for us, for example? Could they look at other things on the risk side? It's about looking at where might those benefits of scale be, where does that expertise sit that we can use? So the proposals are not about Border to Coast taking over Lincolnshire Pension Fund, absolutely not, but we do have to address, the company has to address how potentially it can look at consolidation, should that be required by government. So it's just looking into the future to set a strategy as to what will be done. This isn't all going to happen immediately after it's been accepted. This is a multi-year kind of an evolution of Border to Coast and what they can offer, but there will be nothing, it will be by choice as to what we participate in with the additional offerings that they have.
If I before it's opened out, the issue to a certain extent is the one that you mentioned. Unless we read the joint the joint committee's papers, it's very difficult to keep abreast of everything that's happening in these sort of discussions that take place in Leeds and not in this council chamber. It's very useful to have, the sort of report that you just mentioned in terms of what it is that's taking place and what impact it's going to have on the committee and the committee dealings. And I do sometimes wonder why we don't have as part of our report pack, some sort of summary report that says this is what's happening, in the officer discussions that are taking place, and this is what it means, and this is how the committee will be involved in due course.
Well, it is included in every fund update what's been going on within Border to Coast. A lot of the offer discussions are just the normal things that we would have with fund managers in our oversight role of the money that they manage for us. So the way the communications are done, a lot of the stuff does now sit with the joint committee because it's representing all of those. But Rachel will be coming here to detail everything. As I say, there is nothing that Lincolnshire Pension Fund will have to do as a result of this. This is company direction, this is company strategy, which is why it sits with the shareholders as opposed to the Pensions Committee. So this is for information for the Pensions Committee, and when things impact investment, so our quarterly investment papers, which were at the June Committee, they will detail what's happening on the investment side with Border to Coast and go into a lot of detail there. But on the company side, we will keep the Pensions Committee informed, but there is a clear line between the shareholder role of the company and the client role as an investor in Border to Coast. So it's perhaps, if there's more information that's required, I could attach as an appendix the joint committee papers on it, but it seems you're getting a lot of information more than once then. So.
Chairman, I think it's excellent that we have a situation in the UK where it's the shareholders running the company. So that's very good. It's a very unusual circumstance, and it doesn't apply generally in the case of companies.
We'll take that as a comment, Mark. Thank you. I believe it's Eddie and then Marianne.
Thank you, Chairman. Question for Joe through you, Chairman. On the last paragraph, in fact, the last question on the paper, perhaps paranoia sets in sometimes when I read the question there regarding, would you be likely to achieve long-term savings and efficiencies if your LGPS fund became part of a larger fund? We've already talked in many times in this committee about the possibility of having a smaller amount of pools around, and I just wondered what autonomy we have as a pensions committee, perhaps through Border to Coast, to retain the decision-making process in whether we have any say in if we had to merge with another pool, for example, or indeed take in any other fund into the Border to Coast pool. I'm talking about the autonomy that this committee has rather than Border to Coast itself. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, within the shareholder agreement, if Border to Coast will want to take in any new partner funds or any merger with any other pool, that would have to be agreed by the shareholders, and I think that's a unanimous shareholder decision. I'm getting nods from George to my left here. So if it did get to that point, we would absolutely be informing the committee what was going on and feeding those comments back through section 151 and joint committee back through to Border to Coast. The response, we worked with other partner funds and with Border to Coast to try and ensure that we were talking from a similar viewpoint on this. The one thing we can't go against the tide. We know where it might be going, but we want to make sure that we are ahead of that and we can take control of that. So if fund consolidation or if pool consolidation becomes a requirement, which the government could do, within the 2030 strategy, this is about just making sure that we are ready for that. We have questions and requirements in place should another fund want to come in. They will have to match the ethos of Border to Coast. They will have to buy into our investment funds. They can't come in and take over. So getting all these things in place and agreed before any of this is put upon us, this is part of the 2030 strategy. It's about being prepared. It's not saying we will consolidate pools. It's not saying we will consolidate funds, but we need to be prepared in case that's what government requires. And it's also just, it's also looking wider than just the investment side. It's looking, are there other efficiencies that we can have as partner funds in working together, which we already have. We have governance groups, we have administration groups, we have accounting groups. So it's all just more looking at those efficiencies. But absolutely, the committee would be made aware of this. It would be a shareholder decision, but it wouldn't come out of the blue. If that were to come about, there would be a lot of debate and discussion as to how that might work to ensure that those original stakeholders, those original partner funds, are not impacted adversely.
Thank you, Joe. Obviously, I've discussed this with you many times anyway. So, the important thing I think for a committee to note is that it's all 11 partner funds that have to make the decision, and it's not a majority decision. It is all 11, whether they decide to merge or take another fund in. I just wanted that. You mentioned earlier that I will be basically, with deference to the chairman, basically a spokesman on these issues. Just for clarification, that I need to know, and I should have discussed this with you earlier, but I think it's important for the committee to know as well, that obviously I am not the chairman. Given that I attend a Border to Coast meeting, I have the full backing of the committee to be able to deal with any situation. So I just want that out in the open so that there's no, problems perhaps in the future. Could you answer that, please, Joe? Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, you will be informed of...
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, you carry on. I didn't catch all what you said, Eddie. If you could just speak a little bit clearer. But on your original point of pooling, then I just hope the government don't rush and really force things upon the time we've spent. It's 6 years now with Border to Coast, building that up. That's my only concern. So I do have that concern about the pooling. It looks good, but if you rush it, you may not even get the efficiencies out of it that you think you're going to. I don't know whether we have any control over the speed of the way they want to increase the pooling. We obviously make noises, but...
Yeah, we're obviously waiting to see what the new government come in and look at. They've obviously started the creation of this National Wealth Fund. So it is expected there will be some requirements to invest alongside that. Whether that's a recommendation, whether that becomes a mandation, we don't know. So at the moment, it's all a bit up in the air until we see what the policies that Labour are going to bring in. They're talking about doing a full pensions review, including public sector pensions. So it's a bit of a waiting game. So it's about making sure that we as a fund, we as an asset pool are prepared for any eventuality. I think that's what we're trying to ensure that we do. But I'm afraid my crystal ball gazing isn't very good as to where we might go with this.
I just think also, Eddie, with you as chair on the joint committee and me chair here, then we probably need to share more sentences with one another, in between whatever meetings.
I can assure you that will happen, Chairman.
Yeah.
Am I speaking loud enough? Normally, when I was a young Lance Corporal in the army many, many years ago. I used to have to throw my voice over 200 yards on the other side of a drill square to make sure they understood. So I've gone very soft in my old age. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, just a quick one, Mark, and then Marianne.
Thank you, Jim. Eddie, bearing in mind this is really the first we've heard of these arrangements, because normally, and if we want to make an input to the joint committee, it goes through the chairman of this committee. If that is not going to be the case, and you do require inputs to yourself as well as the backup of this committee at that committee itself, shouldn't we have some sort of recording in the minutes to that effect, so that you do have the backup that you need, and we do know where we're going to when we do input to the joint committee, which is quite important.
Right, thank you. Marianne.
Thank you. Some of what I was thinking has been answered, so thank you. That's been helpful. For those that don't know me, I was on this committee a long time ago, so I'm picking up some pieces. One of the things we discussed then, and I'd be interested in where you are now with it, because it might connect with what the government wants us to do in the future. And I've picked up Roger's point about the £381 billion, and I can't see any new government not saying, well, that's a nice pot for me, thank you, which isn't for them. But we talked before about the green economy and about putting a percentage of the funds towards industry that is green, environmentally helpful. And we have huge a commitment in fact, we have a commitment in this council against the wind turbines, for example, which the government is trying to reverse, but is reversing, but we've had that in place. So if this money is available and it's used to drive initiatives that our area would be very unhappy with, would there be any way in which a local in our committee would be able to have any influence on that strategy, and how different would that be from what the current strategy is? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do a lot. We have a responsible investment belief set that is on our website and is brought and agreed by the committee. So we don't have a standalone allocation to the green economy. What we do is we look at making sure that any investments our managers make on our behalf are long-term sustainable investments, be that across the environmental, the social or the governance aspects of a company. In respect of what may be required by the government, it really depends what they're going to tell us we have to do. So the latest guidance was that there should be a 10% allocation, an ambition, I think were the words, for a 10% allocation to private equity, which wasn't specifically UK, but is linked to the UK economy in their minds. Now, we already have an 8% allocation to private equity, most of which is not in the UK. However, we nearly meet that ambition already, because they are not saying at the moment you must invest in the UK and you must invest in these specific areas. So we are able to select. We have to remember, as a pension fund, our role is not necessarily what is best for Lincolnshire County Council. Our role is what is best to make sure we can pay our benefits going forward to all of our scheme members. So as you'll be aware from your previous time, this is a non-political committee, so we try to step back and look what is in the best interest, where can we get the best return that we expect to be sustainable over the long term. We don't want any nasty surprises. We want to make sure that companies that our managers invest in will still be there in 10 years' time, providing us with that return, so our employers aren't having to pay a lot more into the fund, so our scheme members can get the benefits that they're entitled to. So how much input we will have if we are mandated to put X percent into a UK wealth fund, I really don't know. However, the push from the LGA, from the Scheme Advisory Board, from all the asset pools and from all the funds is very much, we must remember our fiduciary duty. Our role is not to support the UK economy. however much government might like that, our role is to pay pensions. So that's where the push comes from. But we will just have to wait and see where government take that with regulations, because they can regulate that we must do things, but at the moment our overriding duty is that fiduciary duty of paying pensions.
That's very helpful, thanks. And can I ask about the divestment from fossil fuels? Has any of that gone on or not? So, because that's another thing they could pick up. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we don't have a divestment policy. We have a responsible investment policy and some corporate governance and voting guidelines that are brought to this committee annually every December. They are aligned with those of Border to Coast. So Border to Coast have set a net zero target for 2050. Within that policy, it is not about divestment from sectors, because a lot of those sectors, looking at oil and gas, are going to be the ones that are responsible for producing that clean energy going forward. So the committee doesn't believe in divestment from a sector per se. Doesn't mean that the Border to Coast and our managers wouldn't be expected to divest from individual companies if they're not meeting our ESG criteria, alongside other investment decisions. But we don't have a policy to divest from fossil fuels. What we are doing over this coming year, and the training later today is one of the elements of that, is looking at the pension fund, setting its net zero strategy and setting a date for that, and then from that a plan as to how we as a pension fund, as opposed to the council, will be net zero. So the date for that will be discussed, looking at all the risks and opportunities in doing that. So that is being looked at across the year as part of the training and papers that we'll be bringing to this committee.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. You're right, Marianne, the planet is important. And until we get any more sort of directions from government and until they all get bedded in, we're sitting with what we do and what we know works. Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. I was just really wanting to pick up the point made by Councillor Allen. I think it is quite right that we should formalise the arrangements between yourself and Councillor Steagall and the Joint Committee, and would want to make sure that that is recorded officially.
Thank you. You've got two reliable guys that will make sure that will work.
Chairman, thank you, Stephen, for preempting what I was about to say, actually. But,
apologies for that.
I think it is important that, as Mark rightly said, it has to be minuted, so therefore there has to be a formal vote on it. But just a last question for you, Joe. We're going through the 18th Pensions Minister. Who is it?
I don't have a name yet.
Pensions Minister, I think, is Stephen Timms, but I think the Minister in charge of the LGPS is a gentleman called Jim McMahon, who's MP for Oldham. He was the shadow, and I think he's been appointed to the brief. They sometimes don't confirm the sort of level down of Minister within DLUC, but I think it's Jim McMahon.
Yeah, that was my. I haven't seen it officially confirmed yet that it's Jim McMahon, but yeah, rather than the Minister for Pensions, the one that's most important for us is on the local government side.
Thank you. Okay. No more on that one. Right, move on to item...
Chairman,
sorry.
with respect, we have to go to the vote on that issue regarding you and I.
Sorry. Let the committee consider and discuss report and agree whether any action or additional information is required. That one?
No, Chairman, the fact that I will be the spokesperson at the Border to Coast,
sorry.
That's the point.
So we'll add that in to the minutes then.
Yeah, if perhaps we can just add in another recommendation that states that Councillor Strengle will retain the role on the Joint Committee. So any questions for the Joint Committee should be shared with the Chairman of the Pensions Committee and Councillor Strengle, and that the two will ensure that they arrange to discuss any items ahead of any Joint Committee to share information, perhaps something along those lines.
Does that need to go to the vote, Chairman? That's my point.
Thank you.
I think formally, I'm very happy with the recommendation addition that you put forward. It does need to go into the paper, and it does need voting on, or including as part of the overall vote on this item.
We're clear on that
I
one,
would
Joe.
second that.
You second that?
I would second that we need to have a vote on it.
Okay. So we'll have a vote on that then, please. All those in favour of that? Lovely. We'll move on now then. Item 6, this is the Pensions Administration Report, which presents a quarterly report of the Funds Administrator. And we've got Lisa here from the West Yorkshire Pension Fund to bring that report forward. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the normal pension administration report for the period January to March, and the recommendation being that the committee discuss the activity and performance of the administration service during the last quarter. I'll just pick up on certain items within the report, the first being the KPI narrative. A full table of the key performance indicators are at Appendix A, and what I will touch on is those areas that have not yet or not quite met the KPI target within the last quarter. Most of these are quite low priority. We continue to pay all pensions and death benefits within the KPI target. I will touch on that, as you can see, deferred benefits set up on leaving, not quite meeting. They're, again, not classed as low priority in as much as the work done, but low priority in that we let the members know that they've got a deferred benefit, and when we get the time to calculate that benefit, that is then sent out. As you can see, there's quite a lot of the KPIs that have not met the target within interfunds linking, in, out, and transfers. And that's been over the last few months. There was quite a lot of changes to GAD factors, which meant we had to stockpile cases. And then now we've got the regulatory changes with regards to McLeod, which has again, in short, meant that we've had backlogs, which we're now working our way through. Again, not seen as high priority within the payment of benefits, but if cases are urgent, then obviously these would be pulled out and done as urgent. I will touch briefly on the monthly posting one because that's slightly under target in this last quarter. We have been introducing a new system for employers to upload their monthly returns. It's called the MP3 or MC3 system. They're currently using the MP2 system, which has been in place since 2014. The new system is there to make sure it's much easier for employers to upload the monthly returns through the portal, but also does a lot more checking to ensure the data that we have on our system is much more accurate. The reason for the kind of low percentage on the meeting of the KPI is because we've been a double loading through both systems, so our finance team and staff at West Yorkshire Pension Fund can see how that's working and help employers if they are coming across any issues when they're loading. But the current state of play is that a lot more employers are now on this new system, and we should see an improvement in that key performance indicator. Just looking at point 2.1 staffing, we obviously have a rolling programme where we let you know about any vacancies. In most areas there's no vacancies within the teams, but within the service centre that do the administration. We have been seeing a few vacancies across some of the teams. We have been filling posts, and within that period we did fill 8 pension officer posts. And there were some vacancies for senior pensions officer posts, which was pensions officers then got those posts as well. We have got an ongoing programme for looking at recruitment, and at the moment we still have a few vacancies, but again as this rolls on, we continue to do interviews and put new people into place. There was one audit undertaken in the period, pensioner payroll, and that came out as good, and there were 3 recommendations for improvement, and these are all being implemented by the relevant managers within that area. Just to touch briefly on the shared service budget, again, we're looking at a forecast of £18.56 per scheme member with a forecast for 24-25 at £19.77, which does include a cost for the McLeod remedy that is in place. Again, we're still looking that we're under the £20 benchmark that we kind of look at as being a benchmark of where we would like to be. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Me with a bad ear, and I'm that ear, and I'm struggling to hear you.
Oh, right, sorry. Under the shared service risk register, as part of the collaboration, the shared service partners, the risk register has been produced. That hasn't had much change. There was a shared service meeting in November 23, and it highlighted that risk 2 would need further review once the shared service refresh had been completed. Just to update on that the shared service agreement, when we were writing the paper, was with Eversheds, and the shared service partners had met with Eversheds, and I now believe that's now with the fund's legal departments to look at. So once they come back to us, we can then finalise the shared service refresh. Just touching a quick on the regulatory update, I've mentioned about McLeod. It has had an impact, as I say, across all LGPS funds, so it's not just West Yorkshire Pension Fund and Lincolnshire Pension Fund that have been affected by this. So we've been waiting for the regulations to come out. We then had to put transfers on hold. We've now been told that we now actually have to process these, but we're still waiting for our system to be updated to be able to do the calculations. But what is positive at West Yorkshire is that our staff have been able to do the manual calculations, and if anything's needed to be done urgently again, it can be performed and the calculations done. But we have now started to do the manual calculations for the cases that do need to go out. And thank you, that's my report for today. If you've got any questions, happy to take them.
Thank you, Lisa. Questions? Mark?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't really have any problems with the report, and as Roger said, you know, we do get generally a very good service from WPF. Is it WPF? Anyway, Fund Advisor. The report also gives some information about some of the performance indicators in relation to issues that are affecting your work, which is useful. And if you look at the full table of KPIs, it's quite clear that most of them are being met. The issue that is a little, so that's not a problem per se, but the issue that's a little bit concerning is that the direction of travel does seem to be downwards, and I just wondered whether resourcing was still an issue and whether you got any comments to make on resources.
I'll take that question if that's all right, Chairman. Yeah, it's probably fair to say resourcing is an issue. We do continue to recruit. In fact, since the report, we've had a couple of resignations as well. One on our IT team and a member services manager who actually is looking after the fire service, so that probably won't be much of an impact for the LGPS. But it is, resourcing is an issue across all local authority pension funds. We have recently appointed a HR person directly paid for by the fund, still working for Bradford, and we are undertaking a number of initiatives working with schools, colleges, universities, etc. So we are looking to expand our kind of market in terms of where we recruit people, but recruiting pension experts, people with knowledge at the higher level, is very difficult, unfortunately. And it, as I say, it is an issue across all sectors. But just in terms of direction of travel for the KPIs, again, I think we do pretty well in comparison with some of the other LGPS peers that I meet with on a regular basis. So it's, yeah, whilst it's not the ideal, it's unfortunately a trend across the sector, and pensions over the years has become much more complex, much more difficult, and the software providers, unfortunately, haven't been able to keep pace with the changes required. And again, because we've had to stockpile cases, because we've had to do manual calculations, spreadsheets, etc., that certainly hasn't helped.
Return on that. Thank you. I mean, resources has been raised with yourselves in the past, and your response is similar to what you've given us before. And certainly the ability to say that we're a lot better than other pension authorities, pension support authorities, is quite a good one. I mean, the current new government has used that very successfully in terms of a landslide election, so it does work. The question I would put to you, though, is if the direction of travel is going downwards, and whilst we at the moment are generally meeting all the KPIs, which is quite good, have you a period of time to actually resolve the issue before we start coming to you and saying, you know, there's real problems here? Or do you think that the solution is it's going to become very, very difficult, and this is going to be an inevitable situation because of the situation that exists in your particular part of the public sector?
No, we are looking at solutions. I'm not saying certainly this is what it is and this is what we accept. We're looking at a number of areas where we're looking at automation. We're very close to releasing some development we've done, particularly on deferred benefit automation as well, and that will make a big impact in that particular KPI. And we'll move towards automation in other areas as well. So we do have a resource plan in place where we're looking to tackle some of these underperformances. So hopefully you will see a difference in the coming months.
Sorry, it's a quarterly report we get, as you know, so we can make sure that we pick that up probably in your report in 3 months' time, if you could please, and we'll make a big mark in the minutes to make sure that we do keep following that up. If I've got committee members with those concerns, then we would be wrong if we didn't pursue them, Eunice.
Yeah.
Okay. Eddie?
Thank you, Chairman. One for perhaps Lisa and Eunice, but perhaps Joe might be able to help as well. MacLeod seems to be going on forever. I think 5 years perhaps now since it started. It doesn't seem to be coming to a conclusion at all. Have you any estimation on when they're finally going to conclude this issue? Because there will be impacts, obviously, to each fund. Well, I'm assuming they will. But have you any ideas on that? Thank you.
The simple answer is no, we don't. It has been dragging on. I agree with you entirely. Legislation just keeps coming out, and we've had last piece of legislation a few months ago, so we can only work with what we've got, and again, what we have is at the mercy of the software providers as well, in terms of how quickly they develop solutions as well. As you've seen from Lisa's report, we've had to stockpile cases because of MacLeod. Certainly on the transfers, we've started looking at underpins on the transfers. My colleagues back in Bradford have told me that at one of the meetings, regional pensions officer meetings they attended, a lot of other pension funds are not even looking at underpin calculations for interfunds. So we've stockpiled and we're doing them manually. Other authorities are just kind of pushing them through without the underpins. Presumably they'll have to revisit them at a later time. But we have no end time scale in terms of how long is a piece of string really with MacLeod.
If I can just add to that, I think there is a requirement for next year's annual benefit statements to include McLeod information for all our scheme members. So that will be a target to be looked at, and West Yorkshire will be looking at that already. As to the actual impact on the fund, other than all the work it's created in administration, there's actually financially very little impact, because there's very few members that are actually affected by this. Because if you think over the last few years, the CPI that we've been getting on our care pensions has been far higher than pay awards we've been getting on pay. So it's a huge amount of work that's having to be undertaken for a minimal number of people that it's actually going to impact. But I think, you know, West Yorkshire will be making that deadline of next year's annual benefit statement showing that. But exactly as they say, we are at the mercy of government and software providers. But I think we are doing a good job with what we have. And as I say, the actual impact for members, which is really what it's all got to be about at the end of the day, is absolutely minimal.
Okay, Eddie. Tom?
Thank you. This wasn't really part of Lisa's presentation, but it is on her report pack. And it's on page 56. It's the employee contribution bands, and it always triggers me into some sort of rant or complaint. So I will try and make it into a question as well. I'm just thinking of my role as the employer representative for academies, and the vast majority of our staff are in the 5.5 and 5.8% band, whereas the employer band is 20 to 25%. I'm just thinking of such a massive differential. And whether there is, I know it's not something we can control or West Yorkshire can control, but whether there's any chance maybe in the future that they look at upping the percentage for the employee, which may then bring the employer percentage down, and then obviously save the taxpayer and everything. But I know it's not something we can control, it's a national thing.
Perhaps if I jump in with that first. Obviously the rates that the employee pays are set by government, so completely out of our hands. There is, however, a piece of cost analysis that's done looking at the overall cost envelope of the LGPS as a whole that should be within certain tolerances, and if it goes above or below those tolerances, then potentially benefits can change. Now, that could be in increasing benefits to members, depending on which way the costs have gone. It could be reducing, it could be changing contribution rates. That will be a government decision. Originally, it was set up expecting to be 1/3 scheme member, 2/3 employer. Now, we've obviously got a valuation coming next year. They come around very quickly, where, again, we'll be setting new employer contribution rates going forwards. But the employer contribution rate is something that we engage with our employers. We ask them to talk to us when they get their valuation reports. We talk to them about the process. So there is the ability to engage on that side. However, we really don't have any oversight or any input into what the bands are that the scheme members pay. I think, did you want to come in?
I was going to say much of what Joe said. They did actually look at reducing the contribution rates for employees. There was a debate whether McLeod, that we've just talked about, would be taken into account in this cost cap valuation that Joe explained. So there was actually a danger at one point that the employee bands might drop further. I think that's fallen by the wayside. But it's one of these things that I think when they changed the LGPS in 2014, very little thought was given to how it's actually going to be administered in practice. And there's a number of things that make it extremely difficult for employers to administer. So members moving around these pay bands, for example, is one of these sorts of complexities in the administration.
Clearer, Tom? Thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Chairman. Luckily, you are the employers in your respect are represented by you at this committee. The employers in the majority of the cases, of course, it's just simply the council taxpayer who isn't represented at this committee at all. Arguably, apart from the councillors concerned.
Good comment. Any more there for this item? Lovely. We'll move on now to item 7, which is the Shared Service Pension Administration, which summarises the operation and governance of the shared service arrangement, and we've got Ewan here to bring this through on behalf of West Yorkshire Pension Fund.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and hello to all the members. Thank you for inviting me here today. I've been to this meeting once before. It was a year or maybe slightly more than a year ago. There are slightly some new members of the committee since I last visited. And I thought it might be useful almost to go back to basics just to set out, hopefully relatively concisely, how the shared service administration arrangements operate, what the shared service does, what things are left solely to Lincolnshire Pension Fund to do, and an opportunity for members to ask any questions. Any sort of very detailed technical questions, Lisa and Eunice might be better placed to answer them than me, so I'm glad they're here with me. Section 1 of the report sets out the history of the shared service administration. So Lincolnshire Pension Fund were the first LGPS fund to join the shared service arrangement. Since then it has grown quite significantly. We've got the London Borough of Hounslow and the London Borough of Barnet that have also joined. And we also provide the administration for around half of the fire pension authorities in England. By number, we probably have less than half of the membership. I think the big fire authority, the London one, is administered by a local pensions partnership. And some of the other big fire authorities, like Manchester, for example, are done in-house. So it tends to be probably the smaller fire authorities that we provide the administration to. Key point, I think, is that what does shared service mean? Well, I think it means it's a not-for-profit arrangement and that the shared service partners have a role in the governance and the direction of the shared service. It is only the local government schemes that really have a sort of role in the direction. We have, as we're going to explain, a collaboration board, which the fire pension schemes aren't part of. So it is that point and the not-for-profit point, I think, that would set us apart from a third-party administrator that you could appoint who would be looking to make a profit and wouldn't necessarily give you much input into the running. All the staff who work on the shared service are employed by Bradford Council. We do have a handful of team members who are still based here. We took a 2p transfer of staff at the point that the Lincolnshire Pension Fund joined the shared service. And this gives us a sort of local point of contact here in Lincolnshire, which is good. Section 2 of the report sets out the services which the shared service provide. So onboarding new members, when members leave, either retirement or become deferred members, processing deaths, transfers in and out, some of the KPIs that we discussed around Lisa's report. One point to note, which is quite key, is that we do the payroll. We pay the benefits on a monthly basis and lump sums on retirement for all the funds other than the London Borough of Hounslow. London Borough of Hounslow have a payroll contract for paying the wages there that they also use to pay the pensions through. Next section sets out employer services. It's probably subtly but extremely important, I think, to have good lines of communication with your employers and make sure that employers know what to do. If your employers don't know what to do, you end up with bad data, which creates problems further down the line. So very, very important that the employers are well trained and know where to come for questions. We receive data on a monthly basis from all the employers, but the contributions are actually paid direct to Lincolnshire. And Lincolnshire will then check that the contributions are of the right amount using data that we supply. Funding strategy is something that isn't done by the shared service. That is entirely decided by the shared service partners. So each shared service partner would appoint its own actuary, set its own funding strategy, set its own contribution rates. We do get involved in the admission of new employers and the termination of new employers. So admission agreements and liaising as part of that process. Technology is extremely key to the operation. Big administration functions, such as this one with around 500,000 members, you become very dependent on technology to be efficient. Also becoming a much bigger factor, I think, in pensions more generally. Pensions dashboard, which I'm sure has been mentioned at this committee in the past, will probably be quite pivotal, I think, in how pensions in the UK are administered. Only two main players in the LGPS in terms of providing software, Civica and Haywoods. We are with Civica. That's problematic to a certain extent. I think it might be beneficial if there was more funds in that market. Civica's, it will have its faults, but it's quite a flexible system, which I think has been useful to our operations. Paragraph 2.10 talks about a new website. I'm really looking forward to this being launched, probably looking at being launched in a couple of months' time. We've demoed it with the officers from the funds, and they've been providing input as to exactly what information they want on there and what they want their section of the fund to look like. So I'm hoping a big improvement in terms of a Lincolnshire member going on the website and being clear this is a Lincolnshire pension fund. No confusion around which pension fund are you a member of. So I'm looking forward to that website going live. Also worth noting that the cyber security and sort of general IT infrastructure are also shared with Bradford Council, so that there's input from senior IT people in Bradford Council in that area, which is very important. Section 3 of the report talks about governance and oversight. Joint advisory group of West Yorkshire Pension Fund provides sort of general oversight to the shared service. Meets 6 monthly. We're doing a governance review at the moment. I would envisage that group might actually meet quarterly, maybe from sort of 6 months or 9 months' time from now. A lot of important things coming thick and fast in the administration space, and I think we could do with that group meeting more frequently. JAG receives similar reports to this committee, Will, around KPIs, administration performance, all the big issues on administration. Also a couple of other sort of key groups providing oversight and input, which is the collaboration board, meets on a quarterly basis that I chair. Senior officers, both on the sort of finance and pensions operations side from the shared service partners, take part in that group. And there's also a shared service meeting, which is for the pension managers, which meets on a more frequent basis. Also a detailed system of internal controls, as you would expect. We've got the Bradford internal audit team providing input. Lisa provides updates on that in her report. And we also have a quality management system. Section 4 of the report talks about costs. All partners pay the same cost. It's a cost per member that we calculate. So we charge the same for the fire clients as we do for the local government partners. Costs are estimated at the start of the year based on estimated membership numbers and our expected budget. And then at the end of the year, we will do some sort of true up based on actual membership numbers and actual costs that have been incurred. Costs at the moment are just under £20 per member we're predicting for 24-25. We're part of a benchmarking service, and there's also a sort of national thing coordinated by DLUC around administration costs. We're towards the lower cost end of the spectrum, which is pleasing, but I think, as you would expect, given our large number of members and the efficiencies that this can generate. But you're probably looking about £10 per member lower cost than the average in the LGPS. So if you sort of equate that by your membership numbers, you're probably looking at £700,000, £800,000 a year lower cost than the average. Section 5, I will note on the costs, there's quite a detailed exercise that goes on at West Yorkshire to separate what is a shared service cost and what is a West Yorkshire Pension Fund only cost. So we're very clear in our internal accounting what is West Yorkshire Pension Fund's cost and what is the shared service cost. And section 5 of the report talks about the future development of the shared service. At this meeting today, there's already been talk of sort of what next. You've got the Minister's letter, more focus, I would say, recently on further consolidation and administration. Previously, most of the talk's been around investments and saving investments costs, but there's now more focus on administration cost. George could probably give a much better answer than I could on this point, but my instinct is merging large administration functions is extremely difficult. If you've got 150 administrators in one city and 150 administrators in another city, getting 150 to move from one city to another is very challenging. Maybe it's got slightly easier with flexible working, but I still think you'll be running 2 sites at least for a long period of time, which is not something I would like doing. So I see the potential for further cost savings from sort of big mergers of funds on the administration side is fairly limited. I think the potential risks probably outweigh the potential benefits. There probably is scope to grow the shared services further, but we need to make sure we're doing a good job. My immediate focus is on making sure we provide a good service. I've got no desire to go out touting for new business. It's making sure that we do the day job well. So given the sort of, you know, the change we might expect from a new government coming in with new ideas, etc., I'm really looking on a kind of day-to-day, do the job well basis than any grand sort of plans for the future. And I think things like the pensions dashboard coming in might sort of fundamentally change how administration works as well. I think now is definitely not the right time for a number of reasons to be setting out grand visions. So happy to answer any questions members have.
Thank you. I think with all services to councils, we're looking for value. And your value has to come out of your staff because they do the preparation. So I suppose it goes back to the earlier point of you're still looking for recruiting, etc., etc. So I think that's my concern, that your worst performer lets you down if you're not careful. No matter what business you're in, what association, finance or building, it's those people that can let you down. So you know your business, you know how to recruit. So that we're just recapping what we've said. Eddie first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, without wishing to sound sycophantic, I think West Yorkshire have done us proud over the last few years. Quite honestly, it's a surprise, Eunice, that there's no mention of an award in here for some reason. It's probably because your cabinet is now full. The question perhaps is a bit unfair, really, to you and anyone. Perhaps Joe can answer it as well. This pension dashboard, we've been talking about it for quite a while, and obviously there are going to be implications for every fund, basically, and every administrator. Have we any idea when it's likely to be finalised? Because I don't. Thank you.
I'll attempt to answer that. Eunice can correct me if I get anything wrong, but we're required to connect to the infrastructure by October next year. So you appoint something called an ISP, which is your sort of software that connects the fund's data to the dashboard infrastructure. If a member logs onto the dashboard, it uses this ISP to do a search, whether there's any matches at West Yorkshire Pension Fund. So we think all LGPS funds need to connect by October next year, but I think there's some uncertainty as to when the dashboards actually go live. Government, obviously, and the sort of arms of government that are running this programme don't want to turn the system on until all the funds have got their data there and it'll work well. I think they're talking about 2026 at the moment, but I think there's a danger that it could slip slightly if some big pension funds aren't sort of, you know, sticking to their side of the bargain by the dates that have been set out.
If I could come back, Chairman, thank you for your indulgence. Yes, obviously, if I've got this right, the pension dashboard will also include DC schemes as well as DB, which I would imagine would create even more of a problem trying to get all that data together. But is that correct? Thank you.
Yes. So I think the government wants all pension information on there, so state pension information as well. We've got a sort of DC wing of the LGPS. We have these AVC accounts, and the responsibility for making sure their data's on there has also been passed to us. And they're quite messier AVCs. They cause a lot of administration problems in the LGPS. So yeah, DC info as well. I've gradually, I'd say, got more positive about pensions dashboards over the last year or two. I've got a friend who works in medical sales, and he's had lots of jobs over the years. He keeps getting jobs for companies that get taken over very quickly and these sorts of things. And I explained pensions dashboards to him, and he thought it was a brilliant idea because, you know, he's lost track of a lot of his pensions. So anecdotally, I'm sort of more positive about the impact it will have than I was 2 years ago, say.
Okay. Mark?
Thank you, Chairman. I found the report very good, clear and concise, and illustrative of why we're still involved with WYPFA, so that's very good. just a couple of points. There's an acknowledgement in section 5 that you're not seeking to increase the partnership numbers, which I think we've raised before because of the issues associated with resourcing. I think we at this committee will be very keen that you concentrate on supplying your current partners, including ourselves, rather than expanding your partnership numbers with all the difficulties you just mentioned about different sites and trying to consolidate resources, never mind, fill the gaps that you've actually got at the moment. So I'm very comforted that you've got that sort of comment in it. The website was quite interesting as well. I must admit that when I've had the odd pension query and have contacted Bradford, I've always had a very good service from your staff. They've always answered the questions and advised me what I need to do and all those sorts of things. So if the website's going to help in that, that's all very good. I would suggest that we don't try and concentrate on the website with answering everything through FAQs and bot chats, which don't seem to work in my view at all. Thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, thank you. One thing that the report doesn't mention is what's happening with branding. Obviously, 2014, when we signed up with yourselves, it was one of the things that was promised to us. This year or last year, when we agreed to continue the contract or the shared service arrangement, again, it was one of the things that, yes, we will be looking at this. There's no mention, it is a soapbox of mine, I'm well aware of that, I've raised this numerous times, but we still have issues where our scheme members and our employers think they are part of West Yorkshire Pension Fund. Now, having seen the new website, it is excellent. I'll say the demo I thought was really, really good. There is still quite a strong, which we raised in the meeting, WYPF across it all. But my concern is as long as the key email address is pensions@WYPF, just getting our scheme members, we're proud of being Lincolnshire Pension Fund. We want to ensure our scheme members and our employers know which fund they are part of. So could you just give us an update, please, on what is happening with branding?
Thanks, Joe. I obviously wasn't here in 2014, so I don't know the discussions that were had and what was promised, etc. But I'm very aware that there is strong support for a brand in this room. I am agnostic really as to what we call our service. What is important to me is that we do a good job. The reason I haven't promised to do anything in this report is I can't guarantee what our joint advisory group will decide. So we tested the water, Eunice and I, at our last joint advisory group meeting on this, and it didn't land brilliantly, in all honesty. We will continue to chip away and try and explain the merits of a brand, but I'm reluctant to put anything in promising that we'll achieve it just because it's up to the joint advisory group at West Yorkshire ultimately to make up its own mind, and no matter what we say, it's not guaranteed to happen. I'm hoping the website certainly helps overcome some of these teething issues. It's a little bit frustrating that we can't do anything about the email addresses. I think it comes down to cyber security and which servers emails go through, data protection rules, all these sorts of things, technical complexities around that. But we will continue to explore in the meantime anything that we think can improve things for members.
Joe and then Mark.
So if I can just come back on that. I think it might be useful for perhaps some of us shared service people to come along to one of your JAGs, because it isn't just Lincolnshire that is saying this, it is Hounslow, it is Barnet, as the other shared service partners. The email address, I do know that other shared services, Peninsula Pensions, for example, do have separate email addresses, even though they are administered by an administering authority. So I would, whilst you might be agnostic about it, the feedback, if I'm answering the phone and I'm getting a member saying to me or an employer saying to me, I'm in the West Yorkshire Pension Fund, whilst at the end of the day it doesn't make any difference to the benefits they're going to get, it is, the thing we really push with pooling is that sovereignty. So I think it is something that is important to the Lincolnshire Fund. And if there is anything that would be useful from the shared service partners to be able to attend a JAG or discuss it with your JAG to get that point across, then be willing to do that.
Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to back up the comments that Joe's making. I was involved, I think, back in 2014 with this sort of issue. And whilst I have no problems whatsoever ringing the Bradford number and talking to the people in Bradford, and indeed I do understand, because you know I have had some involvement of why I am ringing Bradford for a query about a Lincolnshire pension. I'm quite sure a lot of our members do not really understand what it is and must get very confused about ringing Bradford up about, and West Yorkshire, about a Lincolnshire pension issue.
Sorry, if I can just add, I understand, Joe, the email is I guess the big issue, but just in terms of correspondence we send out to members, every time we write to members, they do get letterheads with your own fund branding on. So hopefully there's no confusion in the written correspondence, because it will have a Lincolnshire fund logo that goes out. But I guess the email is an issue, and again we'll go back to Bradford, see if that is something they can address.
Thank you. Tom?
Again, I'd sort of go on this theme. I'd introduce a third layer, which is it's the local government pension scheme as well. So sometimes when I get people in my office asking me what the pension scheme is, I do struggle to sort of explain where they should go for information. So I don't want to put anyone off from joining a pension scheme, but I do sort of say, well, it's the West Yorkshire Pension Fund, you can go on their website, but it's actually the local government pension scheme, what you're joining. So it is confusing, so I would back up what Joe was saying.
Thank you. Well, the branding seems a concern. So whether we want to bring something in with the recommendations at all to try and look at that and improve the branding. And I think Tom's right. I've had pension fund members ring me up and say, "Oh, aren't West Yorkshire doing well with investments?" I said, "Yeah, great." Of course, we know they don't touch that. So there is confusion, and Tom's quite right. So do you want to bring a recommendation in just to try and strengthen the work on that in the future?
If we could add an extra few words into the recommendations so that item is covered perhaps, and you can give it some consideration and perhaps bring something back to us in due course.
Do you want to repeat those words, Joe, or formulate some sort of words so we can...
I'm sure you can do it better than I can.
Agree that. Sorry?
I'm sure Joe can do it better than I can in terms of getting it into the minutes.
Yeah, we'll work with Rachel to get something added into that.
Okay. So can we all agree on that then, please? Thank you. Any more? Thank you, Aaron. Okay, we go to item 8, which is the annual report and accounts 23-24. Provides an update on the audit for the financial year. Claire?
Thank you, Chairman. The report covers the presentation of the pension fund accounts. We'll give an update on the annual report, and then we've also got the final audit plan for 23-24, and KPMG will provide an update on the audit that's being undertaken at the moment. The recommendation is that the committee approve the draft pension fund accounts and note the external auditor's update. The pension fund accounts have been completed and are attached at Appendix A. They're currently being audited, and KPMG will provide an update on this. As in previous years, the value of unquoted assets may be subject to change between the draft accounts that you're seeing today and the final accounts, which will be published in the annual report. We're monitoring the movement in those valuations and will update the accounts if necessary when we come to the point of the external auditor giving an opinion on them. Any changes will be reported back to the committee. Fund officers are currently working on preparing an annual report. As you may remember from committee earlier in the year, the Scheme Advisory Board have issued new guidance for the annual report, and the annual report that we'll bring to you in the autumn will be based on this new guidance. The deadline for publishing that document is the 1st of December, and we don't anticipate that we'll have any issues in achieving that. A copy of the external auditor's audit plan is attached at Appendix B, and I'll now hand over to the team from KPMG to take you through the audit plan and also give a progress report on the work that's been undertaken on the accounts to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Firstly, I have a colleague with me today, Mool Agarwal, who's the Senior Manager who's responsible for the pension fund audit as part of the team. In terms of on the agenda today, we have the audit plan. You will recall this was presented as an indicative plan at the last committee. Since then, we've completed our review of the prior year auditor file, which was outstanding at that particular point, and completed any outstanding planning and risk assessment work. So we can now formalise this. I'm not going to take you through the detail, but just highlight key points that the key planning considerations that we set out in the indicative plan, such as materiality and the risks, have remained the same. We've been able to define our approach and refine our approach and ensure we capture the right financial statement captions in our audit work that we're now undertaking. I can also confirm there's been no changes in our status on independence. You know, we are still independent as per the disclosure within the audit plan. I thought it would be more valuable to actually bring you up to date on where we are on the final accounts audit. We're at a quite advanced stage on the final accounts audit and at testing the financial statements that Claire has presented. There's a small number of areas that are either with officers to reply to or recently been provided back to us. And I note the comment that Claire has made regarding the valuations and those staying live as well. The working papers we received from the fund were of a really good standard, and we've had excellent cooperation in terms of responding to queries, questions, as you inevitably get during an audit. In terms of key issues, there's nothing significant I'm required to raise with you at this moment in time, but for completeness, I think I should mention we will be flagging when we bring back our final audit highlights report in September, segregation of controls issue regarding journals, which isn't that uncommon in terms of organisations, and also a prior year disclosure issue, which we've noted in the prior year notes regarding the classification. So it's only a classification of the fair value of assets and which, you know, whether they're level 2 or 3. We just internally consulting on that and whether we need to ask you to draw that out through a prior year adjustment in your accounts or not, but it is only a disclosure adjustment. In terms of next steps, we'll have to complete our work and share our audit highlights memorandum with officers into August and present that at the next available pensions committee, which I thought was September, but I think could be October. So I'll clarify what that is. And then in terms of signing the audit opinion, as you're aware, that does depend on the progress of the council's audit, but I'm currently aiming for the end of September for that. I'm happy to take any questions through you, Chairman.
Thank you. Well, I've read most of that, and it is a positive report. I think, for me, you look back, we had that awful period, the pandemic. Since then, the fund has increased in value considerably over the last 3 years. So we must be doing something well. And with the shared services, with Borders to Coast, through this committee, through the pension board, we must be getting it pretty well right. Who was first? Mark, go on.
It's very brief, Chairman, so it shouldn't be too demanding. I thought both the council's report from the accounts and the external auditor's report is very good. It hasn't raised any issues, and it's very good to get the external audit report backing up what we're putting forward. So, no great problems. The question I've got is, where do we stand as an authority in relation to the various, both the council accounts and the pension accounts, in terms of actually satisfying our requirements and deadlines? Are we doing a lot better job anyway than other councils?
So in terms of the statutory deadlines, the pension fund account, so the document that you can see in front of you today at Appendix A, had a statutory deadline of the 31st of May. That was achieved, so our accounts were ready and available on that date. They were also with external audit for the start of their work. In terms of the annual report, so that will come back to you in October. That has a statutory publication date of the 1st of December, and that's quite a long way into the future, and we don't anticipate any problems with achieving any of those deadlines. As Rash has said, a large chunk of the audit work has been completed, and they hope to give an opinion subject to the County Council being ready at the end of September. Certainly by that point in time, we'll be ready to go, all being well. So I don't have any concerns around that. The real issue for us and for the County Council is that the two sets of accounts need to line up together. So we both need to be ready before any opinion can be given on those documents. In terms of our position in the sector, I think we're quite well placed. We're one of a very small number of authorities who had timely opinions from the previous year, which has put us in a very good position for this year, with KPMG being able to start their work because the previous auditor's work had been completed prior to 23-24 being started for us.
I think in reality some councils are still working on last year's accounts and have not got those approved yet.
And
so
possibly
we must,
even earlier years
and possibly
as well.
even earlier. So
Yeah.
we must be doing a very good job in our authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Eddie?
Thank you, Chairman. On page 82, it mentions the AVCs are managed by the PRU, Claire. My understanding, obviously, having dealt with the PRU many years in my past life, obviously deal with investments, but also insurance and various other things. I would imagine these AVCs are DC plans. How do we monitor the actual DC returns from the PRU?
So any AVC contributions do not form part of our accounts. They're purely a disclosure within there. It's at a member's discretion whether they want to be a part of the scheme, they want to sign up for AVCs. Actually, in terms of the number of members that we have, it's a very, very small percentage of those who've chosen to have AVCs. It's purely at an individual's discretion, so Prudential offer a number of products which any member can sign up for. In terms of the use of Prudential and the products that they're offering, we did a review 18 months, 2 years ago on the service that they were providing. That was brought to this committee. So on a regular, irregular basis, we will have a look at the services that are offered and whether they remain appropriate for us to be offering. There are very few providers in the market, so there's Prudential, Scottish Widows as well, one or two others, but there isn't a large pool for us to pick through for offering that service. But certainly, as it stands in the accounts at the moment, we're awaiting the annual information from Prudential. Anticipate that will be received in the next month or so, so the disclosure that we'll have in there will include some more figures than are currently disclosed at the moment.
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. Yes, I've no problem with the Prudential. They're probably the biggest in the country, really. Doesn't mean to say they're the best, of course, but yeah, no problem with that. I just wanted clarification on how we see the DC investment returns. That's all, but you've answered that. Thank you very much.
Any more questions? Okay, we have a recommendation here that the committee approve the draft pension fund accounts and note the external auditor's update. All those who are happy with that, please. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 9, the annual pensions committee training plan and policy. Joe?
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the annual review of the committee's training plan and policy. The recommendations we have on this paper are that the committee approve the training policy, discuss and agree the proposed areas for training for future meetings, and approve the annual training plan. Training policy, which is at Appendix A on page 153, sets out the training and development requirements of both members of the committee and officers of the council responsible for the management of the fund. Paragraphs 2 to 5 set out the reasons behind those training requirements. There's been one main change to the policy, removing the requirement to complete the Pension Regulator's Public Sector Toolkit. This is due to the publication of the new General Code, which I'll cover on the next paper, and the new General Code replaces the old Code 14, of which that toolkit covered. There is an expectation that there will be a replacement at some point from TPR. There's no guarantee that it will be public sector specific though, but as and when that does come across, we will look at that to see whether or not it should be added to the mandatory training. Just as a reminder, the training requirements that are set out in the training policy are detailed at paragraph 13. And the table at paragraph 15 sets out the current position on that mandatory training, and the position at the end of July will be included in the annual report as required under the new guidance that we have for that. Just as an update to that table, Councillor Coupland has actually completed all that training now. But members do have until the end of July for that 12-month window to complete the LOLA training as agreed last year. The annual training plan on page 158 sets out training already agreed and how the committee papers meet the SIP for Knowledge and Skills framework requirements, because obviously it's not just individual training sessions or conferences, etc. that do this. Every paper that we bring to you covers part of that knowledge and training required. So that's all in there, tying them back to that framework. And the framework requirements are all set out in Appendix B on page 163. So the committee are just asked to identify any future training that they would like to receive that's not already covered within the papers or plan going forwards, and I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Mark?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have any problems with the training that's in the report that covers the period to June 2025. But I'd like to make a comment to the officers. It's the same comment that myself and the chairman of the audit committee made to the officers supporting that committee, and that is that there may well be a substantial change of membership, have to be a substantial change of membership of this committee after the elections in May 2025. And what we asked the officers to do on the audit committee, which again requires quite a good deal of training, not as formal as perhaps here, although it arguably ought to be as formal, that could they look at training programs that come into place very early in a new administration, to try and bring new members up to speed as quickly as possible so that they understand what's happens at this committee and can take an active role in it. I think that would be very useful, personally.
Yeah, if I can just come back on that, absolutely. I've already had early discussions with Nigel West as Head of Democratic Services as to what we can do post-elections to try and, before people are even put on committees, get an understanding of what are the requirements, what does it mean to be on the Pensions Committee, and hopefully get some engaged and interested committee members that realise how much fun it's going to be. The other thing that actually we're having had discussions with Councillor Coupland is we're creating an induction manual. So it will be a paper copy. We'll go back to good old paper, and we will have a booklet, a book, A4 folder for everyone with all the key information, including a glossary that committee members will be able to keep with them, bedtime reading, bringing to meetings, so that they've got some really useful information at hand to remind them, because obviously we live and breathe this as officers, but very aware that our committee members, you know, come into this every few months. So we're looking at how we can improve that going forwards. Thank you.
Could I also suggest that we try and get to the members when they are nominated to the committee through the trainings, the online training session as quickly as possible, even if it means doing it almost in the committee room, so that they can be supported in terms of how they access the system and how they actually work through the system, to get that knowledge into place as quickly as possible, rather than towards the end of the session, at the end of the committee cycle almost.
Yep, thank you. It is important because, sorry, Aaron, in the 7 years I've sat on here, there's only 3 members that are still here. That's myself, Eddie and Roger, I believe, apart from the officers. So when new members do come on, I think it would be great, you know, whether it be during mid-term or new term, and they've got a booklet and they know the foundations of how the Lincolnshire Pension Fund operates, because there's so many elements to it. And Marianne probably, you would probably think, well, yeah, great book. I'll just sit down and when I've got an hour or two, and just take it in, read it again, take a bit more in. So it's something we're working on, not just for this year, but for new recruits next May.
Thank you. I did ask for the online training, which I thought I would need before my first meeting, actually. I didn't expect to be able to do a meeting without that. But nevertheless, just to cover, what I wanted to say was about the acronyms. You know, whilst we feel that we're just talking here, actually this is a meeting in public, and a member of the public should be able to access the information. And it would be helpful to me if we used a few less acronyms. Thank you.
We'll take that on board, apologies. And I think we have been trying to set up that induction training, which is where we'll then get you set up on the online system. So we'll come back to you on that, thank you.
Well, certainly the acronyms, they lose me. You know, you have to go back and they don't just... Eddie?
Point of clarification, Chairman, ABC's additional voluntary contributions, DC defined contributions. Anything else I can help you with? I'm used to them, 24 years in the army. Believe you me, I just lived acronyms. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, with the current concerns for training, because we talk about that a lot, is that actually on the pensions risk register? I know Roger's referred to the TPR, sticking our head above by not having the training.
Yes, ensuring that the Pensions Committee is properly, and officers are properly trained and knowledgeable, is on the risk register, yes, absolutely.
Any more? Okay, we've got recommendations here that the committee approve the training policy, discuss and agree proposed areas for training in future meetings, and approve the annual training plan. Are we all in agreement with that? Thank you. Item 10, which is TRP General Code.
Yeah, thank you.
Received that from Joe.
The Pension Regulator's General Code is covered on this paper, also known as TPR. So it's just updating the committee on the new code. Recommendation here is just to consider and discuss the report and agree whether any additional action or additional information is required. So the committee will hopefully recall that they had the training on the code's new requirements at their March meeting by Jeff Houston from Barnet Waddingham, and that the code doesn't just consolidate all the old codes but actually updates some existing requirements and sets out the regulator's expectation in a number of new areas, including what schemes should do to comply with the legal requirement to have an effective system of governance in place. It does apply to all defined contribution and defined benefit schemes, although not all of the obligations in it apply to all types of schemes. To assess our fund's compliance initially, we've purchased a compliance checking model from the company Aon, and we've completed an initial high-level assessment across those areas that are shown as essential for local government pension scheme funds. So West Yorkshire were asked to respond to several of the sections because it relates specifically to the controls and the work that they do on our behalf on the administration. And I think at the stage they did that, they hadn't yet done their full compliance checking, so very high-level responses have been provided. So once West Yorkshire have undergone that full compliance assessment, we will get those questions updated and answered so that we can make sure that there is full compliance there. The report of the output from the model from Aon is attached at Appendix A and highlights just 3 areas where there are some essential actions to be fully compliant. These are across delegations, so we have investment delegations in place. we don't have a clear set of overall fund delegations, particularly on the administration side. This is something that we've been working with Yorkshire to make sure that that is all in place and properly documented, and we will be bringing together a full fund scheme of delegations over the coming months, which will come to this committee. The second is cyber training. We do have on our training plan that we will be bringing some cyber training to the committee and to the board. That's something that we need to do, though, to cover the compliance there. And also publishing longer-term plans on administration. So we have our business plan, our annual business plan that is brought to the committee and the board. However, that does just look at the coming year, so we'll be looking to get the information from West Yorkshire to ensure that we can put those longer-term admin plans into that report. We know that they already have those longer-term plans, so it is just a case of us bringing that into our business plan. This isn't a static code. It will change, it will get updated, and this is something that they will look at on a regular basis, and we will do a deeper review looking at those areas that are not essential for LGPS but are perhaps just best practice to see how we comply there, and are there other improvements that we can make in how we manage the fund. And we will report compliance going forwards annually to this committee. However, if there are any areas or issues of concern, we will bring those in the quarterly fund update to ensure that the committee is informed of where we are with that. So that was all I was going to say on that, but I will happily take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Fairly straightforward. Good. We have a recommendation that the committee consider and discuss the report and agree whether any action or additional information is required. So I think that one's settled, yes? If we could just raise hands, please. Thank you. We all understand. Lovely. Thank you very much. So agenda item 11 here is the consideration of exempt information. I'll read the Act out so we're all clear where we are on that. In accordance with section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, agenda item 12 has not been circulated to the press and public on the ground that it is considered to contain exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. The press and public may be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of this item of business. So we can just take a vote on that, please, members. Thank you.